Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special on the road edition of the Sam's Report. I am in Seattle, and obviously, I'm not in my studio. And if you're trying to watch the video and you're wondering why you're only hearing audio, it's because, it's 7:30 in the morning, and I'm trying to record a podcast. And you trust me, you really don't want to see me at this hour. But the show must go on, life must go on, and it was a crazy week of build, a very crazy week. We're going to dive right all into the craziness, the goodness. I had a lot of fun. There was a lot of good stuff announced, and we are going to go head first into this. Now, I want to answer a question that I got by quite a few people. So if you weren't watching the Twitter feeds and doing all that stuff, and I don't blame you, Twitter can be a crazy bit of awfulness. I got my hands on the legendary Clippy suit yesterday. Yeah, like the one and only, the true Clippy suit. And so I wore it around build. It was really ridiculous. And so if you go check Twitter and you search Clippy and you see all those photos, yep, that's me. And people are wondering, one, how did I get it? Well, mysteries are better left untold. But the second reason of why I got it is actually a story you may or may not care about, but I'll let you know on what it was. So for both days of build, there were pre-brief sessions. So the day before, all the press would get all the information, so that way we could write it up. If you notice that between 8 and 8:30 every day, all this news went live. We had it all covered. That's why, because we got it pre-brief sessions. And during this, the head of Microsoft's communications, Frank Shaw, he was giving me a hard time, and he was calling me out on stage for a few things. Just joking, obviously, but giving me some hard time. And I said, it'd be hilarious. And I was talking to Paul and Mary Jo. I said, if Clippy showed up and he said, hey, I see you're trying to insult Brad. Here's a few better suggestions. And they both looked at me and said, hey, we're going to interview him on Windows Weekly on Thursday. It'd be hilarious if you could actually make that happen. And so lo and behold, I was able to pull a few strings and get the Clippy suit out of the Microsoft archives. And when Frank was doing his interview session on Windows Weekly, I busted in like the Kool-Aid Man, and you can go watch it. And Frank was befuddled, and you don't see that very often from somebody who runs the global communications for a billion-dollar industry. So that's why I had it, and then I went walking around, went into the press room, and it was quite fun. The thing is immensely hot, and I got to give a shout out to Paul because he almost killed me. You can't see your feet. Like, you can't even see probably 3 feet in front of your feet, so you're walking kind of blind, and we had to go down 4 levels. We were on the 4th floor, and Paul says, hey, why don't we get on the escalator? Because, I can't see my feet, and getting onto a moving platform, that's a lot of fun. Just kidding. I was afraid I was going to be returning this Clippy suit covered in blood. But anyways, on to day one of build. Day one of build is kind of what we looked at as what pays the bills for Microsoft. These are all the growing revenue lines of business. This is where they make most of their money. It's why people were honestly here. This is a dev show. And so one of the big things that was announced was called Cosmos DB. So this was an evolution of Documents DB, but really what this is the ability to replicate a database anywhere around the world with extremely low latency and consistency, and it's backed by service level agreements, what people generally refer to as SLAs. And what that means, for those not aware, is that if Microsoft promises what they call 5.9 performance guarantee, meaning uptime of 0.99999 or latency of sub 10 milliseconds, if it breaks that, then Microsoft owes them money, or at least some sort of compensation. And so this is a huge deal because it allows you to take any database, replicate it across the world, and have extremely low latency, high availability with quite literally just a click of the mouse. You create your database, and then you click the regions you want it replicated in, and it's done. This is going to be, for high availability applications, this is, I don't know if game-changing is the right word, because there's other things on the market that are similar. Google has Spanner, but this is much more intense and much more service level backed. I believe in everything that Microsoft is promising, so they're kind of out on their own ledge with this. And it's going to be interesting to see how this takes off. It's going to be one of those gradual things that new applications will be built in. And to be honest, it's actually already running. Companies like Jet.com we're using, I think like 1 billion transactions are already going through this stuff. And so it was an evolution of the Documents DB platform. I find this stuff really fascinating about how this is going to improve performance of of applications no matter where you are in the world. It'll be interesting. I think this got overlooked by quite a few people, and it supports just about everything. It supports NoSQL, Mongo, and everything else that you could really imagine. So go check that out if you're playing in that Azure space. Cosmos DB. It looks really interesting. Other things that were announced on day one: Cortana skills. So these are kind of things like the Echo has, but one of the ones that I'm really pumped to see is the Dark Sky. I use this all the time on my iPhone. Dark Sky is a great little thing that will tell you quite literally 10 minutes before it's going to rain. It's hyper local radar and weather data, and so it's coming to, or actually I believe it's already there with Cortana skills. I was quite surprised to see them already on board. This gives me a little bit of hope of optimism that these Cortana devices that are coming, like the Invoke, really do kind of stand a chance, because Microsoft is getting out of the gate early, although I really wish that Microsoft would have given away Invokes on stage or something to that effect, so that people could have gotten these things into the hands of more developers. But they did not. They didn't do any giveaways. We're also thinking maybe VR headsets, but no, they said, you can pre-order those things, but they didn't give anything away. Other things that were announced: if you are a Bash user, and this is all from day one, if you're a Bash user, there are now 2 new flavors of Linux coming to you, SUSE and Fedora, and they also announced that you're going to be able to install this stuff from the Windows Store, which is great. It gets more people into the Windows Store, which is something obviously Microsoft has been trying to do for quite some time. And here we go. Now, the one thing is they saying this is going to streamline the process, make it easier to install. Although I will say, if you weren't able to install the Ubuntu Bash in the shipping version of Windows 10 today, you're probably not the target market for this stuff. But anyways, that is all coming too. Cognitive services, big announcements around this stuff, making it easier to access cognitive services. If you're not familiar with what that is, this is the demo on stage where they showed a construction site, and they had a camera in the corner, and that camera, using the cognitive services, because it can recognize images and things in the real world, was able to locate missing tools or help people find new things. One of the demos that they showed off on video is, imagine you have these cameras all set up in a construction site, and an employee needs a saw, and they're on the 7th floor, and they don't know where it is. Using this tool, they can go find it and say, hey, it's on the 3rd floor, and have somebody from the 3rd floor bring it up to them. So that is awesome, and that's a really neat use case, although I don't know how realistic that honestly is, at least at this point, because you think about, okay, that's going to save somebody time, and we all know time is money, but how expensive is it actually to put all this stuff into a construction site? If you've never been on a construction site like the one that they were showing, which appeared to be a high-rise building, to wire up that sort of infrastructure on the go always, to get that type of a savings, I don't think it's going to be cost effective for that type of a scenario. I'm not saying the demo and the technology isn't awesome, but I think that the demo that they showed off, it was neat, but I don't think it's going to represent a realistic use case for what is going on with this stuff. So other things, they did show off the H&K, the Harman Kardon Invoke on stage. That wasn't a big surprise, and they actually showed it being used in real demos. Other things that were announced, though, optimistically about that, is that HP is going to be building devices, and also Intel is going to be working on it as well. So the reason why I'm kind of optimistic about this is Harman Kardon is generally a premium product, and so we're expecting that price point to be probably near the top. HP generally makes a wide range of this technology, or price points, I should say, so I could expect to see that their Cortana devices are going to come in less expensive than what H&K will do. So other things announced on day one: new fully managed SQL services for Postgres, and also, fun fact of the day, Azure AD went down for about 15 minutes yesterday, so just kind of tying all that good stuff in. Actually, true story, and I like to think all my stories are true. I don't know why I prefaced or qualified that statement, but we did a meetup last night, and I didn't get permission to use his name, so I won't say it, but I met the guy who works on identity with Azure and actually on password resets. And so when you can imagine that Azure AD goes down and people don't quite know it, password resets tend to go up pretty high. And so you can imagine what type of day he has when Azure AD goes down for a few minutes. And so build day 2 was obviously the much more exciting day, but it's also kind of more of the legacy business in some respects, not completely. That I shouldn't say it's all that. And so Redstone 3 got its announcement, and it annoys me, but they're calling this thing, and I don't know why, the Fall Creators Update. I don't know if they're calling it that because these are all the features that fell off the original update, Creators Update, but here we are, the second update for creators, and that's the name, Fall Creators Update. This is the year of the creator, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. And so let's kick it off. There's some really good stuff. So placeholders, if you've been paying attention to anything I've said for the past 18 months or so, I told you placeholders were coming back, and here they are. The placeholders are back. They're going to arrive this fall. We will see the beta of them arrive this summer, and they're the placeholders that we kind of know and love. And the way that Microsoft is solving some of the key issues here is that there's going to be a new status column in File Explorer. So when you have the file, typically you have the file name. There's going to be a status column with the cloud icons, and then your standard File Explorer details like size and all that stuff or whatever you have showing. But what it's going to do is that little status thing is going to tell you, is this file stored in the cloud? Is this available locally, or is this stored locally? And there is a difference, because available locally means you could have used it once and it's still there, but it's not permanently on your machine. And so it may go back and up into the cloud. But they're hoping that these new status icons will help people know, hey, this is what's going to be available offline and online. And it's placeholders. I think it's going to be great. I'll be curious to see how well it works, because this is a much more deeply integrated application or service, I should say, or whatever you want to call it. It's not the superficial high-level thing that they originally had with Windows 8. This is actually deeply embedded and works with the file picker and works with all the applications that you know and love. And it also works with OneDrive for Business, and more importantly, for SharePoint Online users, it also works for SharePoint Online. So it's not just a purely OneDrive feature. And I know SharePoint Online and all that stuff, it's all OneDrive kind of infrastructure. So that's not a huge surprise. But for SharePoint Online, that's a pretty big deal, because some of those repositories can get massive. And yeah, and the nice thing is you can see how large the files are from from your local machine. And if you want something permanently on your device, you just right mouse click it and click Save to Device, and then it's always going to be available. And of course, it does also do the Delta Sync, where if there's a change to a file, it will download it automatically to your machine. So I'm really looking forward to placeholders. I think that's going to be a nice welcome feature. Next major thing is the Fluid Design System. Fluid Design is what Microsoft is calling their next language. This harkens back to like the idea of Metro, but this was formerly known as Neon, and Microsoft showed off a bunch of this stuff, and it's coming, and it's going to take its time. And if you've listened to any of these shows before, and I know I'm put myself on a high horse, but it's always nice to hear Microsoft reiterate what I've been saying. This is going to be a gradual integration for the Fluid Design System. Anybody who came out and said, hey, this is going to be a massive overhaul from day one, that the Microsoft very clearly stated, at least in the private sessions, that this is going to be a gradual introduction of the Fluid Design System. It's not going to hit all on day one. And so just be on the lookout for that. It doesn't really add a lot of value in terms of like productivity, but it definitely adds a bit of eye candy. I can't say that I don't like it, but if you're looking for productivity features, this isn't really the one for you. But it certainly does look nice, and hopefully it'll give some cohesive and consistency across the UI, and who doesn't like that? And so UI updates are always fun. They're just not really valuable at the end of the day. One feature that is really valuable and that I'm looking forward to is a feature called Timeline. So this looks really neat, to be honest. And what this is it allows you to go back in time, as the name would suggest, and kind of take over where you were at any given point. So if like last week you knew you were working on a project and you can't find it or whatever, you open up Timeline, you scroll to it, and you can launch it right from this feature. I think this is pretty neat. What does make me concerned about this is that Microsoft only showed this off in a mocked concept video. And so when Microsoft shows mock like concept videos and stuff on stage and not actual demos, it makes me a little nervous that this project isn't very far along. And this may not be completely fair, but I get a little nervous thinking, like, is this actually going to make it into the shipping build in time? Because this is a pretty big project. But they announced it. They seem confident that it's coming. I'm honestly really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a huge help. I think it should be good. There's really no reason to not be excited about something like that. The other cool thing too is Roam. I think it was called Project Roam, but it's obviously Roam, R-O-A-M. This allows you to jump between devices, and it uses the Microsoft Graph, which probably got the most shout out of any Microsoft technology. They said Microsoft Graph dozens of times, especially on day 2. But what it allows you to do is, let's say you're writing an email on your phone, even on an iOS or Android device, if you're using Outlook, and then you jump to the PC, it will roam and you'll be able to move that state with you. And so this should be super helpful for a lot of people. I'm curious to see how well this works and what all applications can be tied into this, but it looks neat. And one of the things I think Microsoft is hoping is that, let's say you're on Windows and you're using Spotify, and you use Spotify and you jump to the phone, Roam would be able to work in that instance as well. Twitter, anything else can integrate this stuff. It's just API access. And I think Microsoft is hoping that this is going to be maybe another feature that might get more apps into the Windows Store. So Roam looks really, really neat. I'm pretty pumped about that. And quite possibly my favorite feature announced is the Universal Clipboard, also known as OneClip. This has had a couple names over the years, but the Universal Clipboard is finally coming. So there's a couple things. If you right mouse click and you copy on your Windows PC, you'll be able to get it on your Android and iOS device. The one downside is that you have to use SwiftKey, which is a third-party keyboard that Microsoft produces. I wish they would do it through an app, because third-party keyboards on iOS, I can't speak specifically about Android because I don't use it enough to quite say if it's good or bad. On iOS, though, it's very inconsistent. Apple's done a pretty poor job of implementing that stuff. And so, but it'll work. That's the way it's going to work. If you have the SwiftKey keyboard, you're able to get all stuff. So I might try to force myself to get used to that. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm really pumped about this. I love this Universal Clipboard stuff. It's the best experience that Microsoft can do, because it shows that Microsoft doesn't really care what device you're using in mobile, because it's working with everything. And you see that with Roam, and you see that with Clipboard. It's like, you know what? Microsoft has positioned Windows to become the excellent companion device, and that's their kind of modable strategy. During the day 2 keynote session pre-brief, somebody very specifically asked if we were going to see anything about mobile or Continuum, and they very bluntly told us no. So there was nothing related to Windows 10 Mobile here, and that's just another sign. If you're still running that phone, be happy with what you have today, not with what you're going to get tomorrow. That's the best way to look at it. I still think they're working on something with Windows on ARM, but they did not talk explicitly about it. Continuum is a big downer. I secretly hope that behind the scenes they're still working heavily on that, but there was nothing announced at Build today about improvements to Continuum, which is disappointing, because Samsung is coming out with their DeX software, and Microsoft had the lead there, but they're kind of squandering around that stuff. Another neat app announced for Redstone 3, and this is where the creator stuff comes from, is called Story Remix. And so it's kind of along the veins of Paint Remix or whatever, 3D Remix. I actually really like this app. So this is a video editing app that Paul and I were complaining about for a while. It's like, they're calling it Creators Update, but there's no video editing app. Well, now they have one. And it's not just a video editing app. This is a pretty powerful thing. I highly recommend you go watch the videos from the keynote about it. But here's the deal. So you can take a video, and then you can actually implement objects into it and anchor them. So the one example they showed is a girl kicking a soccer ball. And so you can actually turn the soccer ball into a fireball, and then when it hit the net, they added an explosion. And so that doesn't sound like much, but go watch the video about how easy it is, and how this is going to be able to bring this type of technology in video editing software to the masses. And the nice thing is if you use Paint 3D Remix, Remix 3D, the online marketplace thing that Microsoft has created, you can import any of those objects into these videos and bring them to life. I honestly think Microsoft did a wonderful job here of building a video editor that isn't just another boring video editor. I'll be very curious to see how Apple responds to this. Microsoft has been getting a lot of credit for really going after the market that Apple somewhat abandoned, that creative segment. And this is another great app for every user that can really enhance videos. I'm very... I was going to say I'm very proud of Microsoft, but I think that's probably not the correct way to say it. I think they did a good job. I think they found a way to differentiate something that is relatively mundane at the end of the day, video editing, and it's not something that looked hacked together, and they showed it off, and it's not some prototype thing. Like, this is out. It's supposed to be out now for the insider builds, and so go check that out. I'll be curious to see what people are able to make. I really wish you could export to GIF. I didn't explicitly see that you could do that, so I wish that was happening. But it's a neat app. I definitely recommend checking it out. Other things announced, that's really the gist of Redstone 3. They did say it's coming in the fall. Microsoft previously said September in a different blog post about their goals. So look for the September-October timeline for that type of stuff. VR headsets got a lot of on-time stage, and not a whole lot new was announced. We did get the price points, so there's going to be $399 and $299. We already kind of knew that stuff. Available this holiday season. Other things, though, they announced motion controllers, which I think are really cool. So the $399 bundles are going to come with motion controllers, which do not require not third party, but external devices. Like if you're familiar with the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, you need these sensors to be able to track the controllers. Microsoft doesn't need that for their devices. What it looks like is there's two sensors on the front of these headsets, and they can see the controllers and track it. And Microsoft says they have 6 degrees of freedom, and they look good. You know, I think this is going to be good. So $299 and $399 for this kind of stuff is a good price point. But here's the big thing with this stuff. So I would make the argument that these VR headsets are probably targeted at the niche enthusiasts, especially the early adopters, right? And so this holiday season, they want you to spend $299 on this stuff for $399, you know, if you want the bundle or whatever. That same demographic is also going to be targeted with the Xbox Scorpio. So they're going to have a choice. Do you want to buy a Scorpio or do you want to buy a VR headset? And I think it's going to be one or the other. And I honestly think that it's going to be the Scorpio that wins. I think more people would buy that than a VR headset. Just because you already know the experience coming out of the gate. There's going to be a lot of content, that thing. So I think that's going to be a tough sell initially. But again, this is a longer term play, this VR, AR headset stuff. Microsoft calls mixed reality. But that's going to be the option at the holiday season. But I see more people buying Scorpio than this stuff. But I could see that this stuff is going to have a longer tail than the Scorpio. So that is coming. One other thing that was announced, at least it was on Twitter, and I haven't fully verified this, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate based on what other people told me, is that the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift will not work with the Windows holographic stuff. That sounds kind of odd, but at the same time, Microsoft stuff isn't going to work with, I don't believe, Steam out of the gate, or at all. We don't quite know unless it comes to the Windows Store, and obviously it's not going to work with the Oculus stuff either. So it's, you know what, it's a different ecosystem, and here we are with multiple ecosystem. So the big shocker, though, from this event was the apps that were announced. So there was like Autodesk and all this other stuff, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying those announcements. But the big shocker was Microsoft is bringing iTunes, or I should say Apple, is bringing iTunes to the Windows Store. This is huge. And this is a very big deal because for people who are going to run Windows 10S, there's 2 applications that come up time and time and time again. And Microsoft acknowledged this behind the scenes, that they need. One is iTunes and the other is Chrome. Now, iTunes cannot be replicated. Microsoft can't make an iTunes. They can make a Groove, they can make other things, but they can't make iTunes because it's Apple stuff, it's Apple Music, it's your backup recovery, it's got encryption, it's got all that stuff. That is Apple's, and Microsoft can't do that. So them to get iTunes into the store is actually an extremely big deal and makes me a lot more confidence that Windows 10S really might honestly succeed. I'm getting more and more confident seeing that this platform isn't going to be Windows RT version 2 and that there really is some actual muscle behind this. So props to Apple. I'm assuming that this is a Centennial app and not a true UWP, but either way, it's in the store and it's going to be serviced that way, which is a big, big, big win for Microsoft. Do not undercut that value that this brings, because that's a huge deal for Microsoft. It really is. That is like the tier 1 app that they need. The reason why I'm not saying that about Chrome, yes, Chrome needs to come to the Windows Store for Microsoft to truly have Windows 10 all locked down, or Windows 10S, but there's a lot of issues. For example, Chrome would have to use the Edge rendering engine. We talked to Terry Myerson. Actually, I talked to him, and he kind of casually mentioned, he said, you know, I'm not in the business of giving exceptions for building apps for the store, but I could honestly see him giving an exception to Chrome, but the issue is Chrome would have to use Edge HTML browsing engine, which that's not going to happen. So I don't know. The thing is, you don't absolutely need Chrome in the Windows Store for Windows 10S because Edge is there. Yes, I fully agree that Edge is not as good as Chrome, but it's at least a viable alternative. There's no alternative to iTunes. So we'll see. I don't know if Google is really going to do this, but you know, let's give Google a chance to see if they're actually going to try to do this and work with Microsoft. It would be a big win for everyone involved. But I think Windows 10S might really actually have some muscle behind it and long-term longevity. Excellent job. I'm zonked, even though it's only 7:30 in the morning. So that's the huge stuff. Other things that we were able to see: Windows on ARM. So Microsoft did a session, Windows on ARM, where they showed off the Snapdragon 835. I gotta tell you guys, the performance on that thing is incredible. If I was Intel, I would be pretty nervous, to be honest. Like if you were blindfolded or didn't know that this thing was running on Snapdragon, you'd have absolutely no idea, at least from the applications that they were showing. Performance looked great. Now, granted, they weren't running the most heavy applications, but for a basic user, by all means, everything looked fantastic. And that's really all there is to say about it. People were saying, well, what's different about it? Nothing's different. That's the whole point. It's Windows 10 on ARM. Like, you can't tell a difference. That's the point. In the demonstration, they downloaded 7-zip from the web, fired it up, extracted the file, installed it, and then ran the application just like you would on an Intel or AMD based machine. And the performance is wonderful, guys. I'm really, really pumped about this. I'm curious to see how this changes the dynamics of the PC market. So good job to Qualcomm and Microsoft. I mean, this stuff is looking fantastic. No word on when that stuff is coming out or when we're going to see more, but we know that devices are going to start shipping in Q4. And so there you go. Yeah, so I didn't actually post a question thread this week, but Michael Martinez did the good deed and actually created one. And there's a couple questions that we'll dive into, but nothing too crazy here. So Tourniquet asks, he says, when Joe announced Fluent Design, he said it will come to the shell and apps. Can we assume that it'll also come to Windows 10 Mobile? Usually when Microsoft talks about Windows 10, it also means Windows 10 Mobile in recent years without specific mentioning it. I also got the impression Microsoft will continue with Windows 10 Mobile for Enterprise. I don't know if Fluent Design is coming to the phone. It seems like it should because it's coming to UWPs, and UWPs, as we all know, make their way to these phones. But I got to tell you guys, Microsoft was extremely quiet about talking about Windows 10 Mobile at this event. And so if you're holding on for the last vestigial of hope that Microsoft is going to come launch some massive new thing that's going to save Windows 10s, it was not announced here, and it was not announced with Fluent Design. I don't know about the enterprise stuff either. I'm sure HP is forcing them to do some things, but again, that's going to be enterprise stuff and nothing too crazy, and I don't have a lot of details on it, mostly because Microsoft didn't tell us a lot of details. Michael Martinez says, as we looked at the surprise of iTunes coming to the Windows Store as being a big boost in the case of Windows 10s, do you believe Chrome coming to the store just increased? Google makes money no matter what platform their products are on. Chromebooks and Windows 10s devices are not cannibalizing each other. Therefore, could be hard to see how Google could be each other. Therefore, it's hard to see how Google would be competing with itself. So I definitely hit on this in the normal part of the podcast, and I agree. There's some serious hurdles, and I hope that Google makes this happen. I honestly do, but I think let me phrase it this way. I think the probability of Chrome coming to the Windows Store has increased with the announcement of iTunes. Does that mean it's happening today or tomorrow? Is it in the works today? I don't believe so. There were some rumors and hints of stuff floating around, Bill, that Google is now actually kind of more seriously considering trying to bring Chrome to the store. But, you know, I wouldn't say the writing's on the wall or anything like that, but I definitely think that they're now more actively looking at the Windows Store. Let's see, Porfirio says, in other words, forgive me if this was asked before, but with all the press about laptops with Windows 10s and the free upgrade to Windows 10 Pro, has there been any mention of the ability to reload the machines with your own Windows 10 version, boot and install your own? So this is a very good question. So we don't know. Here's the thing. So let's say you have a Surface laptop and you upgrade to Windows 10 Pro, and then you need to do a restore. Your machine craps out or whatever, and you got to re-download or reboot, or not reboot, but do a system restore. What does it restore to? Is it going to restore to Windows 10 Pro, or is it going to restore to Windows 10s? More specifically, if you pay for that upgrade and then you wipe your machine and re-download the image from Microsoft.com, is it going to put Windows 10s back on, or is it going to force you to go right back to Pro, or will you have that option again, or how's it going to work? This is a really good question, and to be honest, we don't know until we get an actual device running Windows 10s that is what's going to be the retail or shipping version. So this is a good question, but unfortunately, until we play with this stuff, Microsoft hasn't answered those kind of nuanced questions. Spartan Fantasy asks, will there be Windows Insider builds for Windows 10s? I'd like to give it a spin on the low-end laptop I have. I don't know if Microsoft is going to allow you to downgrade to Windows 10s. Will there be Insider builds for Windows 10s? I fully believe so, but at this time, I don't think they are shipping those out right now. And Microsoft has previously said that you won't be able to downgrade. So it's a good question, and typically with Insider there's a little bit more leeway, but they haven't fully announced that stuff. So Windows 10s is supposed to arrive relatively soon. I mean, if they're shipping, let's see, if they're shipping the Surface laptops in the middle of June, the Windows 10s has to arrive before then. Whether or not they're going to allow us to play with it and download it in that capacity is a completely different question. So As always, guys, thanks for tuning in. No video this week, no intro, outro music. I'm on my laptop and I forgot to bring it with me. And so this is a rough and raw edition of the Sam's Report. But for those of you who watch the behind the scenes videos that Paul and I do, there's going to be a pretty good one coming up. Trust me. I think this is one of our better iterations because it's got the clippy stuff. We got kind of stuck on a Ferris wheel. It has been a good trip. So I'm in Seattle this week. Next week, I'm actually headed to New Orleans. So it might be another kind of crazy week for podcasting. Paul and I are going to be down in NOLA, as some people call it, from Tuesday through Friday. Granted, I love traveling, but I don't like traveling back-to-back weeks. I like hanging out with my kids. But anyways, as always, guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed Build. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you right back here next time on the Sam's Report.